Hello everyone, it's Meat Department and welcome to another video. Today we're going to just go through a quick early look at the Soulbinds available for the Venthyr Covenant, as well as the overall conduits we'll have for our warrior class, for all of the specs. As shown here in the bags, we'll go through them one by one. So I am here in Sinfall right now. You can see on the map where we're located exactly. This is where the Forge of Bonds is, where you can set your conduits to your Soulbinds. There's also a vendor right next door, the Conduit vendor, where you can buy each of the conduits you wish to apply to your Soulbind. So I do have one of each in my bags, as we can go through each of them. So there are three different kinds of conduits. There's Endurance, Finesse, and Potency. Each of them gives you a unique ability, and depending on the Soulbind you choose and the pathing that you would like to take, you will be eligible to place either one of these types of conduits into any of those slots. We'll show you in just a minute. But to briefly go through them, we'll show you all the Endurance ones first. This one, Stalwart Guardian. The cooldown of Enraged Regeneration is reduced by 20 seconds. So that means the ability that's 2-minute cooldown will be 1 minute 40 seconds. You could use your Enraged Regeneration defensive. Brutal Vitality. 6% of the damage you deal adds to your active Ignore Pain. So if you're hitting Ignore Pain a lot, you may want 6% of the damage you deal to add to it. And Indelible Victory. This is Victory Rush, heals you for 400% of the damage it dealt over 8 seconds. This is actually one of my favorites right now. Iron Maiden. Slam has a 4% chance to refund a charge of shield block. Okay. And Unnerving Focus. Last Stand increases your rage generation by 30%. So depending how often you use Last Stand as protection, this might be a good conduit as well. Moving on to the Finesse Conduits. This one's Rallying Cry's duration and health granted are increased by 20%. Intervene reduces damage taken by the target by 10%. And Intimidating Shout can withstand 80% more damage before breaking. So you could already start to see some situational spots where these might be used. Rallying Cry might be a very good one for raiding Mythic Plus, where you are hitting Rallying Cry more often, so you're getting the bonus much more consistently. And maybe Intimidating Shout for PvP, perhaps. You could fear, your enemies and do a little bit more damage before they break out of it. Who knows? But then we move on to the last, the Potency Conduits. This one, Overpower has a 6% chance to apply Colossus Smash for 3 seconds. Slam Critical Strikes reduce the remaining cooldown of Blade Storm by 1 second. Recklessness lasts 20% longer. Bloodthirst deals 40% increased damage to enemies who are below 20% health. So really hammering hard in the execute phase there. And Rampage has a 10% chance to refund a charge of Raging Blow. So now that we know what the conduits are and what the abilities are we could add, let's take a look at the Soulbinds. We'll open up the Forge of Bonds, and we'll see we have 3 different Soulbinds. The one I have currently selected and filled out is Nadia the Mistblade. There's also Theotar the Mad Duke and General Draven, each with their own conduit and pathing. Depending on what you choose, we'll let you know what type of conduit you could place inside those slots. So let's just cover what I have selected at the moment and what I've been testing. I chose Nadia, and right from the start, you work from top to bottom. You have to choose between these two options. Agent of Chaos. Dwarf Shadows disorients all nearby enemies at the target location for 8 seconds when you appear. So this is real cool, and I can show you this. When you cast Dwarf Shadows, you place your reticle, but then once you slap it down, you'll notice a circle. That circle is what's going to affect the enemies that are within it when you do teleport. And that disorient for 8 seconds is actually quite a long time, I've noticed. And even in some of my dungeon runs, myself and other players, we strategically use this to interrupt or help group adds up. It's actually got good... this ability is more than just situationally teleporting or getting away from mechanics. It could also be used offensively. So it's both an offensive and defensive Covenant ability, and I think it's very strong, especially with this Agent of Chaos. it's very cool that we have a Disorient to add to our toolkit on only a 1-minute cooldown. But the other option, if you do not like that, is Fancy Footwork. Dwarf Shadows increases your movement speed by 80%, decaying over 6 seconds. So when you pop that, you'll be able to move 80% faster for 6 seconds as it slowly decays. So depending on which of these you chose, will unlock an actual conduit you could place in yourself. If you go down this path, you'll be able to put a Potency Conduit inside your tree. But if you go down this path, as you see, this one wants Endurance. So not only do you need to select the abilities themselves within the Soulbind that you prefer, but you also have to think ahead. If I select this ability, what conduit then will I be able to also have access to in the path that follows? So it's just something, make sure you always take a look ahead before you finally settle on the exact path you want to go, because the conduits you place in there are almost just as important as the abilities themselves. So not only did I like Agent of Chaos, but I also wanted to really utilize the Potency Conduits for the throughput that they offer. So I chose Ashen Juggernaut, the old Juggernaut from Legion, basically. This is where Condemn increases the critical strike chance of Condemn by 3% for 8 seconds, stacking up to 6 times. So ultimately, in the Condemn phases, which are the first 20% HP of the enemy or the last 20 or 35% depending on your talents, you'll be able to get an increase of 18% critical strike on Condemn just by having this and making sure that you do hit Condemn basically on cooldown to keep those stacks going. So in choosing that, I then had to follow the conduit path down, and this is where I had to place a Finesse Conduit. The one I chose was Rallying Cry's duration and health. Granted, are increased by 20%, as this seems to be most useful for me during dungeons at this time, in comparison to the others, which are the Intervene or Intimidating Shout. Next, I just followed the path. There's only one choice. Friends in low places. This one is not yet implemented. You will see there by the NYI. This is where you loot 20% more infused rubies, and dredgers throughout Revendreth offer you an expanded selection of goods. So who knows what additional items they'll have on the vendors. This is something we cannot test at this time. But now I'm at a fork in the road where I get to choose one of 3 ways. Again, we get to not only select the conduit slot of our choice, but also the ability we like the best. So just moving left to right, Exacting Preparation gives you the weapon, or the benefits of well-fed flask and weapon enchant effects are increased by 15%. So this may be a very good throughput option if you're eating, flasking, and of course weapon enchants will all have to increase those effects all by 15%. That could add up to quite a bit of throughput in the end. But we'll have to rely on Sims to ultimately tell us what will be the strongest in that regard when the time comes. Then next up is Familiar Predicaments. The duration of incoming interrupt, snare, and root effects are reduced by 25%. And then lastly, Dauntless Duelist, the one I have selected, is the first enemy you damage in combat is marked as your adversary. You deal 4% more damage to them and they deal 2% less damage to you. You may only have one adversary at a time. So as a warrior, you do need to be careful when you do charge packs, and Whirlwind, as a randomly selected mob, essentially will be marked the adversary. So if you do have priority targets, let's say in dungeons, something I've noticed very important to do before you hit that first Whirlwind, because you want to cleave your abilities of course, is maybe just do one ability to your primary focus target before you do initiate the Meat Cleaver Whirlwind effect. So for this path, I really actually like this adversary right now to deal 4% more damage to my enemy, because at this time, at least in beta testing, we are not really utilizing any of these buffs. There are really no weapon enchants available, no food buffs, no flasks, none of that. So this would have actually been pretty useless right now, but when the game goes live, perhaps the throughput of this will actually be greater than just the overall raw for damage increase to one target while you're in combat. We'll see. But because I went this route, I did have to stick an Endurance Conduit in. That was the only option I had, so I chose Victory Rush, heals you for 400% of the damage it dealt over 8 seconds. So not only do you receive the Victory Rush initial heal, but then again you receive a healing over time for 8 seconds. This has been very valuable as I've been playing throughout the world and even in dungeons getting the killing blows on mobs to be able to have the Victory Rush to use to heal up. Very good ability and endurance conduit when compared to the rest of them, at least for Fury. So I went down this path, and then it led me to the next slot, which was a Potency Conduit. I chose to increase my Recklessness by 20%. So it is 14.4 seconds. But actually, recently, after some target dummy testing, I think I actually want to switch that out, so this is the perfect video to do so. I believe all I have to do is take another Potency Conduit, which I will use this one. Bloodthirst deals 40% increased damage to enemies who are below 20% health. I think I simply have to drag it and drop it right in there, accept it, and at this time the existing conduit will be destroyed. This is a very important point because the system is still working this way, but I believe in recent interviews with Ian Hazakosis, the developer, and others, they are thinking of ways to not necessarily destroy your conduits when you do switch them out and to make them more easily switchable. But we'll see how that all turns out in the end. For now it doesn't matter because I could simply put it in there and it doesn't seem like it did anything. Let's try that again. No, it doesn't seem to want to take. Let's reopen this up. Perhaps I need to activate another one first. Let's take a look. No, now it's just not even letting me do it whatsoever. So something else we have noticed from the alpha actually is with the increase in players and stress on the servers, there has been this inherent ability item use delay. It's not so much the latency being horrible, because I have 84 MS home, 79 world. That's not terrible, considering this is a West Coast server and I'm on the East Coast of the United States. But as you see here, I click Battle Shout and it still has not gone off, even though my latency isn't terrible. This ability lag is something that's really widely noticeable while playing in the open world. So let's go back. Oh, there we go. It looks like it did actually update finally. The Bloodthirst is in there. Alright. So let's activate Nadia. See how long this takes to activate, but while it thinks, we'll go ahead and show you what the final trait is for Nadia. It's Thrill Seeker. While in combat, you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks, looks like the game just disconnected here. Let me sign back in. So again, we can't stress enough that this is beta, and definitely subject to crashes, things not working, lag, delays, all kinds of things. Systems not yet implemented, abilities needing fine-tuning, damage numbers. There's so many factors to it that really the focus is to overall stress and test the system, give some initial thoughts on abilities and structures, and then go from there with the fine-tuning, hopefully, as the development continues on with Blizzard. So that's exactly what we'll do. We'll give our initial thoughts, we'll play through what is available to us right now, and overall see the synergies, the pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses of our classes and specs that we play. So let's hope this loads up here. Alright, so after a few attempts to log back into the game, we finally got back in. I apologize for that, but again, like I said, it is beta and things are not completely polished. So we'll jump back in to the Soulbind, and where we left off, Thrill Seeker. This is the final ability of this Soulbind for Nadia, and while in combat you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks, Thrill Seeker is consumed to grant you Euphoria, speeding up everything you do by 20% for 10 seconds. Thrill Seeker decays rapidly while you are not in combat. So basically, it gives you increased attack speed and I assume spell casting for 10 seconds upon reaching those 40 stacks. Since it takes 2 seconds per stack, that's about 80 seconds, 1 minute, and 20 seconds. So every 1 minute, 20 seconds, you would expect to have an increase in your attack speed overall, which is more rage generation and hopefully ability pressing as a result, before you then rinse and repeat to build up. Your character turns red and it actually looks pretty cool. So that is the Soulbind for Nadia the Mistblade. Overall, I would say this is the DPS Soulbind, and depending on the traits you like exactly, it will determine the conduits you need to select from to stick into these slots, which will then enhance your character even more. So the customization is pretty nice. Now you could fill up to 3 of these at a time, and simply just go to your Soulbind and click activate to switch between them. You'll notice up here on the mini-map is a Covenant Sanctum icon. Not only does it show your missions that you have in progress or available, that we are all used to, but it also shows the Soulbind powers. Right now it still says Theotar the Mad Duke is my Soulbind. So, I could simply go to Nadia and activate her, and now she is my Soulbind. But moving on at another early look at the other two, which I think have a little bit more polishing to do, even more so, we'll move on to Theotar, the Mad Duke. His top 2 abilities for you to choose from are Watch the Shoes. Dwarf Shadows frees you from roots and snares. The second one, Leisurely Gait. Dwarf Shadows is instant cast, but its cooldown is increased by 30 seconds. So you do get an instant cast Dwarf Shadows rather than a 1.5 second cast. However, you can only use it 1.5 minutes instead of on a 1 minute cooldown. But depending on what you select then gives you the option of what type of conduit. So this might also have just as much weight in the ultimate conduit you build to determining the path you take. Do you want a finesse or do you want a potency? Regardless of what you choose, you do get one option and one soul option on the third tier here, the finesse. But then we're at a fork in the road. The next 3 abilities: Refined Palate. The effects of combat potions last 20 to 100% longer. Little gamble on that one. Then Soothing Shade. Your spells and abilities have a chance to call Tubbins and Govins to your side for 12 seconds. Parasol in Hand. Standing in the shaded area grants you 10% mastery. And then Token of Appreciation. Grant a shield that absorbs 590 damage to allies who aid you with healing or beneficial magic effects. You will only shield each ally once every 20 seconds. Again, depending which of these abilities you like the most, you select your conduits, and then the endurance one is forced before you get to the final choice. This one's not yet implemented, Life of the Party. During the Ember Court, your guests gain additional happiness for each event completed. When the court concludes, the effects of any decrees bestowed upon you are increased. I'm not exactly sure what this is at this time, but probably something to do with the Covenant specific things you can do. Not really quite sure of that at the moment. Impeccable Style. Theotar will cover the cost of your transmog. That's very generous of him. And lastly, Exquisite Ingredients. Theotar will send you an assortment of flavorful herbs when you complete activities that contribute to your Great Vault. But the ultimate one is coming soon. We don't know what it's going to be. The trait is still lurking in the shadows, so who knows. This one is still heavily under review, and we'll see what they tweak and balance and choose as his final. But moving on to the general. His top choices: Anima Infusion. Earning Anima improves your armor's remaining durability. This one is kind of mediocre because ultimately, who cares? Pay the repair cost and fix your armor. This one kind of seems like it's definitely needs to be reworked, as no one's probably going to choose this. Expedition Leader. Leaving a resting area increases your mounted speed by 10% and your out of combat regen by 100%. Last 10 minutes and completing a world quest refreshes the duration. Just based on both of these, this one is probably the one you'd pick if you choose the general, because this one is literally pointless. But then we need to choose an endurance conduit. before we can have 3 selections. First one, Built for War. While you are above 80% health, you gain 1% strength every 3 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. If you fall below 50% health, the effect is lost. So here's a throughput option. The middle one, Superior Tactics. Successfully interrupting an enemy or dispelling an ally increases your critical strike chance by 10% for 10 seconds. This may only occur once every 30 seconds. And hold your ground. Standing still for at least 4 seconds grants you 10% increased stamina and 4% increased healing done. This effect persists for 4 seconds after you start moving. So for throughput, you're going to choose either Built for War or Superior Tactics. In the long run, I feel Superior Tactics will be the highest throughput, as receiving 10% critical strike for 10 seconds every single 30 seconds, as long as you pummel, is very strong. Because if we're running Mythic Pluses or anything else, chances are you are pummeling on cooldown anyways. So while you're doing what you're doing, you're going to receive 10% critical strike for 10 seconds. And if it lines up with Recklessness or other cooldowns, that's just another benefit to really boost that throughput even further. So this is probably going to be the strongest one. But Built for War could also be beneficial, especially early on in the expansion when our secondary stats are very, very low to start, and strength is usually a little higher in terms of the worth and the value of it in comparison to the secondaries. But still, it gives you 5% strength as long as you stay above 50% health after acquiring it. So this has some benefits as well. They'd have to compare against each other, but something else to consider is whichever one you choose also lets you choose a conduit. So if this 10% crit one seems strong, if you do pick it, you are forced to then choose Endurance Conduit, which typically doesn't boost any throughput. Whereas if you choose Built for War, you do get a Finesse Conduit, which may be beneficial, but it doesn't look like there are any Finesse Conduits that are throughput oriented so much right now either. So if it were me, I would go down Expedition Leader, Endurance, Superior Tactics, which I guess I can do right now. Let's slap an Endurance Conduit. I like this one. I am at the Forge of Bonds, I thought. Let's open it up. There we go. So first I need to select Expedition Leader. I'll put Victory Rush in there. I like Superior Tactics, so I would like to choose it if it lets me. It says no active links. Oh, there we go. Then I have to choose another Endurance Conduit. I'll have to choose a Potency, so I'll click that. So what else do we have in Endurance? Let's reduce the cooldown on my Enrage Regen, and then Potency. What do I like for Potency? Well, let's improve my Recklessness because I don't have the Bloodthirst one. And now I have options. Do I want Enduring Gloom? Dwarf Shadows grants you a shield that absorbs damage equal to 15% of your maximum health for 8 seconds, so very short term. It's kind of like if you're using Dwarf Shadows while in combat to avoid a mechanic or fallout damage. This could be useful. Or Move as 1. When a nearby ally gains temporary increased movement speed, you also gain the benefit, up to 30%. So what, if a rogue or druid clicks sprint, or a priest hops on their feather or something, you might get that too if you're nearby. That's kind of cool, so you're not left behind. But again, as a warrior, we are usually pretty responsive with the high mobility abilities, and this probably is least beneficial, or we're on the lower end of benefiting from this overall due to our high mobility. Whereas at least the Dwarf Shadow Shield could be useful if you remember that it's there and you use it offensively, defensively, that kind of thing. But also pay attention to the conduits that come after. We already had to select 2 Endurance, so not much throughput here besides this one Potency. Now, do I want to go Finesse or do I want to go for another Endurance? Well, you know, honestly, it doesn't really matter. But something I've never tested, now's a good time to test, is can we use 2 conduits? Let's get another Victory Rush one and see.
We shall meet again.
Alright. So if I chose this one and this one, can I stick this endurance one in here as well? Nope, can't use it twice. Okay, that's good to know. So let's go with the ignore pain one. And then finally we get to the final call to action. Condemn grants 10% versatility to you and 4% versatility to up to 4 nearby allies. Last 10 seconds. But it may only occur every 1 minute. So this means every minute you're going to get a 10% versatility buff. And you're going to also give your allies 4% for 10 seconds. So with Condemn, you'll get that right off the bat when you first engage combat, and then again once you enter execute phase, depending on the talents you pick, on what percent HP that might be. So you'll get this a couple times in a battle at least, and will that throughput be better throughput in the end than Nadia's Thrill Seeker, which gives you 20% attack speed every 10 or for 10 seconds, which roughly takes about 1 minute 20 seconds to get to that Thrill Seeker. So every 1 minute 20 seconds you're going to have 20% faster attack speed and casting, or basically twice a fight you'll get 10% versatility buff. So 20 seconds total boost versatility. Overall I think the throughput from Nadia is definitely much higher, as well as the conduits that she lets you choose, which are potency, a couple potency based ones, a lot of potency depending on the path you take. So that's why she's activated right now, because I feel like it is the best output for me being a Fury warrior. So that was a look at the early stages of the Soulbinds, who they are for the Venthyr Covenant, as well as an early look at the current conduits that are available right now, what abilities and traits they give you, and kind of just a way to think about when you approach your tree. Not only do you want to select the abilities that will be most effective or useful, you find the most fun, but also think ahead, what conduits will that then force you to select in doing so, because that is important as well. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or would like to see anything more specifically, feel free to leave a comment below in the video. I plan on doing this type of Soulbind conduit video for every covenant in the game as it relates to warrior, to give you an early look on exactly the paths. But I would definitely say that Nadia is probably the way to go as a DPS. I think it just gives you the best options, the best versatility, and in the end gives you the most throughput, which is really what we're looking for as a warrior, particularly Fury warrior or arms. So here they are. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like the content, you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, leave your comments. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts for any warriors out there. But until the next video, take care.